Hey guys, welcome to the Rewild Your Soul Podcast. This is a very long-awaited interview with my buddy Michael from Mountain Man Handpan. He's only like 40 minutes away from me, so I'm kind of lucky to have a friend that is tuning and learning to create these instruments so close by. Most of the time I'm traveling far to retune things and to play instruments, so I'm super lucky to have him locally. We wanted to talk a little bit today about his process, learning how he got started, his first instrument that he ever purchased or played, and kind of his journey in learning to tune. He's made quite a few instruments now. What number are you on now?
Cranking out number 19.
Nice.
So we're still in the early days.
But that's pretty far still, though.
Yeah, that's number 19 that I wanted to number.
Yes, fair.
Get to a certain point, and I said, this one deserves a number. And now we're cranking out things that I'm actually proud to bring to the world. So
cool. Very cool. So give me an idea of how you first got involved in handpans, or what was your first
exposure?
First exposure to the handpan.
So in 2007, a friend of mine, Josh Knight, love you buddy, sent me this video, Dante Busey, Let Me Go. And there's this guy sitting on a mountainside playing this thing that looks like a UFO in his lap, and it's making this noise, and I'm like, how is this? Wait, that noise is coming from that thing? So it's in the YouTube early days, and I just dove down the rabbit hole, and I found fellas like Daniel Wapples and Wapples, I don't know how to say your name, Waples. Yeah. I love you, man, dude. You're the bomb, dude, OG, nothing but respect. But yeah, so Colin Folk, and I was just finding all these OG handpan players, and that led me to the forum handpan.org, probably like 2010.
Which is still active, but no one's really on it, but all the information is still there. It's a really good resource for people.
It definitely is. Yeah. And I think they have a sign-up fee right now, but if you're starting your journey, I would say that is an invaluable resource. And so keeping it on the right timeline, 2007, Dante Busey, incredible video. Handpans are made by 5 to a dozen people in the world at that point. And so actually being able to acquire one was next to impossible if you didn't have thousands of dollars and time to fly halfway around the world.
Yes.
But I dove in on all the digital. I was consuming as much digital content as I could, and all the videos were keeping me going, and it was just like, it's the coolest sound that I've ever heard. And so I've been a musician my whole life, and it just spoke to me. So just always going back to it, and eventually in 2012 or 13, there was a gathering that was being promoted on the forum called Songs of the Forest 2. Took place in Brunswick, Georgia, at a place called the Hostel in the Forest. And I got to meet the cream of the, not necessarily the cream of the crop, but like the people who were important at the time in the space. Right. And so at that event, that was the first time I ever heard a handpan in person.
Okay. That's cool. So
seeing it in a video is awesome. Yeah. Hearing it in person is just like,
it's a whole different.
There's an essence to the handpan. It's an analog instrument, and so like there's the thing about it, the sound waves, like the sound waves bouncing around inside it. Like there's so much cool things that I've learned going deeper into this. But really good at throwing things on side tangents.
Right.
Songs of the Forest 2, Brunswick, Georgia. There was like 20 handpans there. So the first time I heard a handpan in person, I heard 20. And it was amazing. It was a weekend. There was jam spaces, and there was seminars and all types of cool stuff. So that was the first time I heard one. And then I drove back home from Georgia, Massachusetts, and it was another 3+ years before I was actually able to acquire one of my own. And so this guy, Bob, who I met at the gathering, lives in Connecticut, and he sold me a Shiraz Oxalista that was made in 2014.
It's an pretty early Shiraz.
Yeah, early Shiraz had a rolled shell from Halo, from Handpan Steel.
Yep.
And it's just a really cool instrument, and that was the first and only handpan I bought, and picked up the hammer in 2018, and it's been a wild ride since.
That's pretty amazing. I remember the particular video he's talking about with Dante's video on top of the mountaintop. I remember seeing the same video around the same time period, and people are like, you added the audio in after the fact. Or do you remember all the comments where like people are like not believing that it actually
was... It is an unbelievable sound.
It is.
I was in disbelief myself.
Yeah. I had a similar origin story for that too. I discovered it, and then I kind of fell into the handpan world later after that, but in a different way than you've managed to fall into it too. What was the first thing that you did to start to learn? Like, what was the first part of the process in beginning to pick up the hammer?
So
start with that?
One of the things that was actually like a big inspiration for me to actually try to make this happen was Colin Folk releasing his plans for the hydroform machine. Like up to that point, everyone was either hand hammering or air hammering the shells into the blanks to make the handpans. So he came out with this machine, and not only that, but like all the R&D he did, like everything you would need to know about it to make one for yourself. Like he just gave it to the world. And so like that was something that I thought was going to be like a huge time saver, and really, like, I mean, it is.
And a body saver too. People
and
destroy themselves.
Yeah, very true.
Shells, so.
But yeah, that was like, it was just a lot of things happening at the right time, and so that came out at basically at the time where I was like, you know what,
you're gonna commit to
things are telling me to do this, and so
that's really cool. That's really cool. So did you replicate Colin's plans to create the hydroform machine?
Yeah, I did.
So the first attempt at tuning was with the shell that you
hydroformed.
made. That's a pretty cool place to start at. Too.
Yeah, it is. It is. The metal shop that I contracted to make the plates, like, they did not work out well. So like the 1.0 machine, obviously there's been iterations, like people make revisions, make things better over time, but the 1.0 machine that I had made was like nothing but a headache, because I had the thing resurfaced a bunch of times. They had to like re-drill the bolt holes, and like the tolerances were all loose, and like so it never got the right seal, and so I'm always chasing a leak around this thing, and it was just a nightmare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I still use it, and like I've pressed a whole bunch of shells, and I'm probably gonna make I'm probably gonna make a version 2.0 before I press any more shells with that.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's such a headache. But yeah,
for people, and you can speak.
That's my version only. Like, I'm sure if you have it made right, like it works great. Yeah. I've seen plenty of other ones where it's just like you slap it in, you hook it up, bada bang, you got a shell, and it's just like, oh, that sounds amazing. My experience has been the complete opposite.
It's also being made, like the people you're working with too to create that have probably never made something quite like that. So,
and I had it made before I knew anything about
before
anything.
You had experience.
So I didn't even know what I needed really. So I just I gave them prints, and I was like,
can you please make this?
Good luck. Yeah.
One of the things that I think people don't realize with handpan making is when people are physically hammering out the shells, whether with an air hammer or by hand, that is destroying on people's bodies. And this is why a lot of makers have moved away from hand-hammered instruments, which I love those instruments too. I love rolled instruments. But that is the part that destroys people's bodies the most, because you're moving so much material. I've other handpan maker friends too that their transition away from that, either using rolled or hydroform shells, it has made their lives so much better, because it's a taxing thing.
Saving physical labor.
And it's hard on your body. It's not like you're chopping wood. You're hitting a steel instrument with another.
If you were chopping wood, as long as it took to hand hammer a shell, like those are both going to be laborious tasks.
Absolutely. So it makes sense to have some of that process relieved for makers. So I understand why people want to move in that direction too. In terms of the first instrument you made, like where you had an instrument already. I'm sure you had something to look at.
Right, I did.
I know makers.
A huge help.
I know makers that tried, and some succeeded, some never continued, but that tried to make one without touching a handpan, which many people did back then because nobody had one.
Right.
Yeah,
which is incredible.
So at least you had a visual for it. But How was starting that?
I'm only able to do what I do because of the people that came before me to lay the groundwork for this stuff. So really, it's nothing but praise for these guys.
Absolutely.
That have laid the path.
Yeah. What was the experience with the first one? So like take them through the process of getting that started.
Yeah, so like I hydroformed the first shell and I was like, awesome, we're off to the races. I hydroformed my first shell. Now what do? I designed and had my own rings made, which also need another iteration of. But
I'll cut in some video of some of his setup here
some of the
as
workshop.
well. So
yeah. We'll be doing some behind the scenes stuff of the Hammer House coming soon, live on the Mountain Man Handpan social pages and website. First handpan, threw the shell in the rings, and I was hand hammering a shape. So this Saraz had really soft borders.
Yeah.
And I was trying to imitate that. Mm-hmm. And what I was doing was like tap,
very
tap. But with a couple hundred taps around an area, like you start to get the shape, and it's like, all right, I'm starting to get the shape. And actually, like the first few I made looked really good, but there's so much more that I didn't realize. Like you can make it look like it, and I'm sure anyone that bought a $400 handpan off Amazon knows what I'm talking about. Looks great, but it's missing a lot. And it's stretching and compressing and this and that. And so I made a bunch of shells, top shells that looked like handpans, and then I started gluing some of them. And it's like, it sounded like what you would expect it to sound like.
It's fair.
And it really was just repetition over thousands of hours over the course of 4 years.
Yeah.
And perseverance through wanting to quit many, many times.
I can imagine.
That's the only way. The best advice that I got at the beginning of my hammering journey, which is the most frustrating at the time, and yet the most helpful in the long run, is keep hammering. Like, how are you going to tell someone that doesn't know left from right, up from down, keep hammering when like this is like keep hammering is a zero direction advice, so
do something.
But really persistence through hammering, like the steel will tell you eventually, like you're gonna have aha moments, and it's just like anything, like practice. You hammer away, you want to achieve something, like you have to dedicate yourself fully to that thing, and then we can achieve great things.
That's an interesting thing about the growth of the handpan. With the Hong being created, once people started to say, oh, I want to have this thing, and the demand was so high that Pan Art couldn't keep up with production, nor did they want to keep up with production. When people started to learn to tune them, they went through that exact process, because nobody knew what they were doing, aside from steel tuners. Like I think David Beery early on was making instruments too, and he was already a steel pan tuner. So some of those techniques definitely transfer over into this. But the way it's laid out, how you're stressing the material and which areas you're choosing is completely different than a steel drum. So all of the people in the beginning went through this same exact process. And at some point with the handpan.org forums, there was some information about that, but before people were sharing that, like Colin's journey on there was nothing. Like there was literally nothing on the internet telling you how you could potentially make
one of these things,
which is crazy.
One of these weird UFO Ninja Turtle looking things.
So you can imagine why they'd be so elusive and interesting for people too, because it's not like you can go to Guitar Center, which you can go to now and get a handpan, but it wasn't available, and the information wasn't available. There weren't luthiers in every country that were making them. There was just random people who were like, I'm going to hammer and try to figure out what the heck to do. So this process is exactly the same process that pretty much every early maker went through. So, and that's why they all sound so different. This is the reason they all sound so different too, is that your approach to tuning and building, how you shape tune, that is going to be completely different than somebody else's, because they're all starting that process with the same desire, I suppose, but they're approaching it in their own unique ways because they're continuing to hammer in whatever different ways.
Yeah,
you know? And I like that about it because that's why every maker kind of has a distinct sound because their approach is different.
I usually tell folks that we're all trying to achieve a similar destination, but the roadmap getting there is completely different for different makers. So like I said, with the Shiraz, that particular one had really soft borders. Like the Pan Art, similar way, not much on border structure. I tend to like border structure. I find it easier to keep things where I want it, and I can control different interactions with other notes better with strong borders, I found. Yeah. Handpans are awesome. I'm such a fan of...
An example of soft borders would be something like a sun pan, or the Pan Art's instruments have very soft borders, almost where you can't see where the end of the note, where the note ends and the sort of interstitial area begins. Whereas his and a lot of makers, you can actually see a very defined note area. And a lot of people like that because of the isolation of that. It tends not to bleed in the same sort of way that a very soft border instrument is. I know Sebastian, who I also interviewed for the podcast, his thing is soft borders. But the less isolation you have in something, the more potential there is for bleed over. And I'm sure it creates its own issues as well.
There are so many variables.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. So in terms of what was the first time that you felt like you actually tuned a note into one of the tone fields? Like,
well, I was very wrong. I was very wrong the first time I tuned a note.
That's okay.
Shout out to Lino and his software, Lino Tune, because like that also was another thing. Like a tuning software developed for this particular instrument. Like there's so much innovation and things that had to be done beforehand to make my life easy. Yeah. But the first note I thought I tuned, I think it was like I got the fundamental to tune, and the fifth was probably like 1,000 sharp or flat, and like the octave was also just way up. But like I got green on Lino Tune, and I was like, after hammering for so long, and it's just like, I mean, looking back on it now, like, I'm like, well, why didn't you just do X? Like, but at the time, like, going in blind, like, I think of like going in a dark room, it's completely pitch black, you light a match, and then you're surrounded by candles, so, like, you start to get lighting candles. And the more you light, the brighter the room gets, the more clarity there is for what you're trying to accomplish. And that really is the process of hammering. It's really the process of like trying to master any sort of thing. And like, I'm far from having mastered what I'm doing, but I'm light years ahead of where I was at the beginning. And so tuning the first note was cool. Got a fundamental, sounded like garbage. I probably still have it kicking around somewhere. I got a big old scrap pile of metal. I like to upcycle. So I made a nice little fire pit with some of them. I've done some artistic things around the yard.
The tuning house here, you have some on the front.
Got some out front. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of the things too, which some of you guys may know or some not, even you're kind of starting from something like this. So when he's creating these, he's using these. This might tell you the shape that the note is going to be in, but the rest of that is literally up to you finding where to hammer there and shaping that. This is literally just like a stencil. Essentially, and the rest is up to the tuner.
It's real easy. Tuning a handpan note is real easy. All right, so this is something you can try at home. So take a cloth, 1 foot by 1 foot, and try to hold it with your two hands and make the entire plane of the cloth perfectly flat. It's that simple. So like if you could do that,
and you'll be
it's that easy. Like, but like trying to get something perfectly flat, just using your hands, not using any other objects, just using your two hands, trying to make it perfectly flat. And that's like balancing the notes and the tensions and the compressions, and it's just like even in the middle of the process of doing it now, like halfway through building it, it's still like, is this going to turn out the way I want it? Like, is this going to be in the fail pile? Like, nothing's guaranteed. So like,
I can make them well now, and I'm proud of what I'm making. But at the same time, from one pan to the next, I'm still striving to make it like the best I can, obviously. But yeah, it's just like it's still every pan is different. Yeah. So like between makers, every pan is different. Even with the same maker, every pan is different because you're going to have different materials. You're going to have a different mindset going in on the day you're going to tune or the day you're going to shape things. Like you're trying to make nice clean borders and then you're stressed out about whatever it is. And like, just, I don't know, like life happens. And so like the essence of every builder is in their hand pan in some extent in that period of their life. Like there's a reflection of that person in their craft,
which is kind of a neat thing. It's like you're capturing a little bit of your growth
of
in
me
every instrument.
Pan,
you know,
there's stories along the way.
That's
for each little thing.
That's something that people have in their heads too about makers of hand pans as well. Is that it's not a consistency thing, but they're even from makers that are selling their instruments for $5,000 or $6,000. Those makers are still going to make amazing instruments sometimes because they're in like you're saying, they're in the right space, everything's
just
working,
hitting that flow state.
Other times it's still going to be good because it's a high tier instrument, but it might not
just
be
use a little
amazing.
Just a tap.
Yeah,
it just needs that little like, and you could chase that rabbit to infinity, right? Because what is perfection? Perfection is in the eye of the beholder. It's in the ear of the listener. Like the pans. Like Dante's pan art, like his hung, like if you compare it to some of the pans we're making today, it's like, all right, if this was brand new today and someone posted it on Facebook, be like, hey, I'm a new maker, this is what I made, they would get torn up.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I hate that about Facebook. That's why I left. I literally posted, so the fourth pan I made, it's like the early days, and I'm trying to look for some sort of financial incentive. Like I'm looking for market feedback on what I'm doing has value and that people are willing to, I don't know, to take a chance essentially. And so I posted this hand pan and I was like, all right, here's the deal. I'm trying to get $500 for this pan, but what you're buying is not necessarily this hand pan. Like, yes, you will receive this pan. But when I finally build a hand pan that like I'm proud of, a top shelf pan, I will make one for you and I will give you the amount you paid for this pan off of that one. Right. So it's like a deposit.
Right, you're investing in the future.
But a deposit that might not break out or, you know what I mean? So, but I posted this up and like, these people were ruthless. They dragged me so hard.
I can imagine.
So I literally just like bounced off Facebook and I was like, I'm not even, so I just went back to Hammer and this was like 2019. It was a year. I was doing it for a year and I'm like, I'm doing this for a year. Like I need some feedback from an honest,
maybe
from
not
a brutally
so
honest perspective.
There's a lot of really strong opinions in the handpan world. And we're in a funny phase right now because in the past the handpan was a little bit more exclusive. Like you and I might be the only two people in this area that had a handpan. Then that probably is still kind of true, but the community has opened up so much, and there's sort of a broader group of people being involved with the instrument now, and it's some of the specialness of having one has disappeared, and I think that it can be threatening to some people. And I came into it at a time when we were in that transition from I was more of a lurker player for a long time, but I got involved in the transition to them being available. So my first handpan was like when they kind of were still not available. I think you probably had one even before me, it sounds like. But it's now such a broad community that the dynamics have changed so much. So there's still a lot of really strong opinions about what quality is, what's the right way to do this or that, what material is the best Titan steel or raw steel or nitrided steel. So there's so many variables in it that there really isn't a correct opinion.
No,
It's kind of
yeah.
like preference.
Right.
And like he said too, if I were to bring my hong and perform with that, and then I were to perform with even some of the cheaper Chinese instruments that I have, people probably would prefer the cheaper Chinese instruments because the sound taste has changed a lot.
It has.
And like before, it was like anything that made that noise was amazing, and rightfully so, because people hadn't seen it.
Overtones. What?
Right. It was, and even like Bali steel, which are still available. You know, they weren't the best, but it was still a handpan, so people still loved it.
Yeah.
And by today's standards, you'd be like,
Right.
I think Josh Rivera has a video of him retuning a Bali steel really early up on his page, and it sounded a lot better, but it still wasn't great by today's standards. So you can learn on anything too. It's not like you have to have a bajillion-dollar instrument to learn.
Yeah.
But I think knowing the maker, whether it's someone like him,
New England for New England.
yes, for New England,
By us for us.
Knowing the argument that I make a lot of times is that having some sort of connection with who made your instrument is going to give you a better insight on how to care for it, what they might think about the stability. You know, if you're just buying it randomly, you're kind of guessing at what the parameters were when it was created. So that's the argument for knowing the person that you're getting it from, because they have more insight than you might be able to Google that up. But yeah, it's been an interesting transition, but it's neat. We went from having 10 makers around the world to like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people making these now.
Yeah.
So more and more people are just picking up the hammer and learning, which is amazing to me.
I just want to second what you were saying about knowing your local maker, because really, like you said, like it's just every maker has their whole processes are different, and so they're going to know their instruments from start to finish better than anyone else. And like people can retune instruments, and really like you've probably seen it. If you've seen several retunes, certain people have certain techniques that go into it, and like two different makers can get the same pan needing a retune coming in, and you're going to get two different products on the tail end. Yeah. And each maker just has their own little touch. It's that path that we all find ourselves going down to get that certain sound. So find your local maker. Like now there are hundreds of makers in the world. You can go, there are plenty of resources. There's Hard Case Technologies, I know, has the worldwide map. There's like Master the Handpan. There's like all different types of resources. There's Planet Handpan. And like you said, someone reached out to me and just purchased a handpan, and they had only heard handpan for the first time 2 months ago.
Oh, wow.
So it's just blown away.
Wow.
The first time I heard handpan versus the first time I heard handpan in person, years, and then more years beyond that to actually get one of my own. So like the fact that I can be a facilitator of a thing that I find so special is really fulfilling.
It's super cool. And it's exciting for me too, because I feel like we were talking about, that community was a lot smaller before, so it was harder to meet people that had one or were making them or retuning them. So it's nice that there's a broader scope of people to work with. In terms of retuning as well, I think what you said is interesting. There's certain instruments that I have that I would want to give to a particular type of instrument maker to retune. Like you almost kind of match it. Once you've played enough, you kind of can hear this, or made enough too. You kind of would want to match that style of instrument to that type of tuner. Yep. And there's a couple of people that I send instruments to. Or I have in the past to get retuned. I really don't retune my instruments frequently, but because of their style of tuning, they're going to be the more appropriate person to retune that. And that's just, again, because of their experience hammering, maybe whether they use soft borders or sort of harder borders. It's interesting that would have such a big effect on it, because anybody can pretty much any maker would be able to retune a handpan. To some degree. Right. It's the same process, but it might lose. I think Josh Rivera talks a little bit about it in the video too, but maintaining the character of the original instrument is a tricky thing. Sure. Which I imagine is probably true if you were to take someone else's instrument and retune it, because you're having to notice how somebody else is tuning it and then try to work with how they
Within
shape
their
that
parameters.
note.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
maybe you add tension in a particular area, but another maker focuses on tension in a different spot.
Right. Top, bottom, left, right. I mean, like, there has to be a balance in order for it to do what it needs to do. But yeah, like you said, there's different tensions and compressions. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it's steel, hammered steel, so cool.
What if you were to take one of these handpans? How would you explain the process of tuning or shaping a note? Like,
all right, so with a semi-spherical blank, I'll have it upside down. I will lay out the templates that Ricky showed earlier, and I'll orient them. I'll make sure that the angle is right, that the spacing is right, and then I'll mark it out. And then I will air hammer like an outline of the note itself with a broad head.
Okay.
And then I will work the interstitial area and smooth everything out nice. So now I have like a blank flat field here.
For those that don't
and
know,
this is stretched.
For those that don't know what interstitial area is, can you
Yeah,
explain
it's the area in between the notes themselves, which you can get tones out of, like if you really want to, and like that's a whole nother.
That's where like shoulders would be in the center, like that's sort of
Yeah.
the space that's the non-tuned
Depending
area.
on what you're trying to accomplish, like I've seen people incorporate like a swishy sound into their musical playing. So like the instrument provides lots of creative possibilities. So I stretch the inside area, and then I do a border, slap dimples on and ding, and then I bring it up to the hammer house to hammer away at tuning. And it's a lot of back and forth and up and down and balancing and this and that, and I just keep hammering.
And I'll probably put a video of his layout. Yes, to this of his layout for. It's not as if you're hammering it in one direction. Like he's not only working with it facing here; he's also flipping it over to the other side of it. So it's not. It's a sort of a three-dimensional movements.
Yeah, I don't have one loose.
Yeah, it's okay.
Kicking around
That's
right
okay.
now.
But it's different than you might imagine if you haven't seen the process.
Yeah,
of one
if you want a deeper dive on the process, I'll be doing a lot of Instagram posts, just showing behind the scenes stuff, letting people know what's going on. And if people are interested, like I've had people that were in the same position I was a few years ago reach out to me about just like random little questions about hammering, and like I'm more than willing to talk about like I love handpans. Any excuse I get to talk to anyone else about handpans, like I'm all about it. Like this can be a lonely industry. I'm up here in this hammer house by myself, basically just hammering steel for many hours, and like it's such a passion. I'm devoting so much time to it. Anytime I can find someone that has any level of excitement about it, like it's cool. It's cool. It feeds me. It helps me keep going. It reinvigorates my spirit to keep hammering.
Yeah, I like that. What would you say is the most difficult part of the process for you? Like, is it predicting obviously the whole thing is difficult, but it, like when you glue the instrument together, do you feel like you have a sense of how it's going to sound before you're gluing it together, and you're fine tuning it afterwards? Obviously, I know the process, but just for them.
Yeah. So in the rings, it's an open instrument, so you have the top shell in the rings, and you can get a pretty good idea of what it's going to sound like when it's together. But when you put it together and you mess with the port hole size, depth, just like everything, there's 1,000 parameters that you can mess with. You get a very different sound on an open pan. So you get it pretty close to what the finished product is going to sound like. And then we'll glue it together. And the glue I use probably takes like 4 or 5 days to set well enough where I can take the clamps off and like start to hammer it. And it still probably takes more days beyond that to like fully cure.
Yeah.
So after gluing, once those clamps go on in the glue, I can do a test run, and really that's when I can get a sense of it, because you get the boom of the Helmholtz resonator, and that's just another element of the magic that is handpan.
Absolutely. Kind of when it's in a tuning ring, it kind of is like a steel drum at that point. Visually, it kind of reminds you of a steel drum.
Yeah, we're using mallets. I'm smacking this thing pretty good.
So there's something about when they're attached together. I've heard other people describe it too, that it something about the feeling of that instrument changes, and you'll get to know what the character of that will be once you further refine that even more once it's glued together.
What it is like it's physical sound waves coming from this instrument. It's an analog instrument. There's physical sound waves. So inside, the air is being excited by the notes inside the thing. So like if you can do the wag and get the bend, like that's physical airwaves that you're like smacking away to get the wah wah sound of it. Like so it's wild. Like I am just it is. I'm over the moon about the things that I make, and it's probably annoying to a lot of people.
No.
Me close. People that have to hear about this all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think
they've had to fill.
The partners of anybody who plays the handpan or makes the handpan probably hate that. In terms of resources and stuff, where can people find your website and your Instagram and all of that?
Yeah, we launched the website at the beginning of 2023, mountainmanhandpan.com. Same handle on the Instagram, and just posting like behind the scenes stuff over there. I'm just trying to gain traction and let the people of New England know that they now have a handpan maker. And I really like to focus. So yeah, that was something we touched on about the local makers that I really didn't really dive in on. But like, I almost in a way want to have my business be focused primarily on the New England market. Yeah. That way we can have a relationship to some degree and build some sort of community locally around this instrument. People buy things online and a box shows up at your door, you open it up and cool, it's product, consume product. All right, on to the next. People do that with handpans. And that's, I don't know, like you said, the beginning it was small and there was something special about it.
It was magic. It felt like magic back then.
I don't want to try to chase something that's fleeting necessarily, but I feel like we can capture something locally with the handpan. Yeah. And so let me build you a handpan if you're in New England. And if you're not in New England too, I'll build you a handpan too. It doesn't have to be exclusively New England, but I do want to be for the people that are here.
And I like that idea of, like I was saying earlier, knowing the person that made your instrument, whoever it is, because then it's easier to understand that instrument itself, because you'll have an idea of that person who actually tuned it, which was kind of the theory that pan art started out with a long time ago, and then it changed over time. But I like the aesthetic of knowing your maker. Yeah, I think that's an important thing.
Colin came out with an article on his website there not too long ago, but do you know your maker?
Oh yeah, I got that in an email, and I was like, well, yes, I know him. It's me. It's him. All right, guys.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up in the middle of a snowstorm.
Yes, we got a foot of snow too. Check out his stuff, Mountain Man Handpan, and I'll post all the links and everything below. And I hope to see you guys soon. And I'll cut in some audio of playing some of these instruments so you can hear them at the end. So stay well, guys. Thanks for hanging out. See you next time.